With iPadOS 26, Apple has given us so much to be excited about. The truly overhauled windowing system, a supercharged Files app, and background tasks. We're finally seeing features that make the iPad a powerhouse. But for every step forward, like the new Preview app or fluid multitasking, there's still those nagging questions like, why does the Files app still feel so limited? Why can't we run true desktop apps? So today, we're not just going to praise the new features that Apple has put into iPadOS 26, but we're going to tackle the identity crisis that comes up every single year, why the iPad isn't a MacBook, and why that may be its greatest strength. The true difference between the iPad and the MacBook is the cursor-driven experience of the computer and the touch-first capabilities of the iPad. They've definitely added a lot to the iPad with things like the Magic Keyboard and the cursor you can move around on the screen, but it still doesn't feel quite the same as using a Mac. It's kind of like comparing a paintbrush to a pencil. So both are for creating, but they require a completely different approach and skill set. So iPad apps are designed to be tactile and direct in the way that you work with them and slide sliders, press buttons on them. But apps on a computer are really designed to be a bit more clicky or also shortcut based with the keyboard. Of course, you can always do shortcuts on apps with the iPad, but you don't want to have all the special features of an iPad buried beneath shortcuts that only power users know. The iPad Air M3 and the iPad Pro with the M4 chip have basically the same exact power of a MacBook computer, but jammed into the body of an iPad. But I think it's the screen that really pushes it into this touch-first philosophy. So Mac OS is really essential if you're doing things like complex software development, intricate data analysis with the traditional file system, or also for deep application integrations that require desktop-level customizations. There's just so many more customizations you can do with Mac OS. It's just not built into the iPad OS. Even things like downloading apps, you have to use the App Store on iPad, but with macOS, you can either use the App Store or you can download anything off the computer, which just allows you to really customize things. And for this, you need a keyboard and a trackpad. So they're not accessories like they are with the iPad. With the iPad, the Magic Keyboard is just an accessory, something to attach to add further capabilities. With the computer, the keyboard and the mouse are the primary and the most efficient ways to get all this custom work done. Also, some software and services still just simply are unavailable on an iPad. The other day, I was excited to go edit my Squarespace site on my iPad Air, and I went to go start editing it, and it actually wouldn't let me add new blocks or even do some of the most basic features of Squarespace. I looked it up and you had to be running a laptop or a desktop to do those, even though the iPad is more than capable of handling any basic website edits on Squarespace. It's also really hard to beat a multi-screen setup with Mac OS because you can do things like video edit on one corner and then run your browser on the other side. That way that you can move all of your clips in and out, which just adds to the productivity that you find with a Mac you can't quite touch with an iPad. So I view iPadOS and macOS not as rivals, but as partners. So the iPad is really useful for features like using it as a secondary display with Sidecar. You could also use universal control where you're working on your main computer doing your heavy lifting, and then using the iPad for things like taking notes, watching content, or messaging apps as well at the same time. The iPad has some really great strengths that do overlap with macOS, but whenever you use them side by side, you realize the entire workflow is more powerful than just using the iPad on its own or just using a computer on its own. So for me personally, I really like using my iPad as more of a writing device and a secondary machine to my computer. It's so useful while I'm working. I can take notes on the things I'm doing, keep task lists open, keep email open, or other messaging apps like that. To me, that's where the iPad with the keyboard case is a really great option that can handle most of the day-to-day productivity. So the future of iPad OS may not just be about chasing MacBook parity and having all the features the same and having apps that can be open on both of them. It's probably still going to be more about Apple doubling down on the iPad's unique strengths, the slim form factor, the Apple Pencil support, and just the ability to interact in that touch-first environment. So the iPad's not a lesser version of a MacBook, it's a completely different kind of device that has its own unique identity and incredible potential. To me, the real power of iPadOS 26 is realizing that the iPad is super flexible while still giving you that touch-first philosophy. So what's your opinion? Do you think the iPad will ever be able to run macOS, or do you think Apple is going to continue to keep iPadOS and macOS as two separate entities? Let me know in the comments what you think. I'd love to hear. Like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any upcoming content.